Can you please share your name?
My name is Joanne Berger-Sweeney, and I'm president of Trinity College. It's interesting to think about my earliest memory of the library, and it's hard for me to identify a specific memory or time because I can't remember any time without the library being involved in my life. So I was fortunate enough to go to inner city schools in Los Angeles that had libraries from the time I was in kindergarten through 12th grade. So this identifying what a library was versus what was going to school, I'm not sure I can identify a specific time or a place when I remember first thinking about a library. The second thing I would say is that my family did love books. So I was fortunate enough to grow up in a household that had books all around all the time. So once again, that distinction between library, not library, is not very firm in my mind. Books had a significant impact on my life. I just loved reading from the moment that I learned how to read. I loved stories that took me to faraway places. Now, you might think, as a kid growing up in Los Angeles, wasn't I living the dream? But what was so important about books for me was it took me other places. It took me beyond my Los Angeles neighborhood to other countries, to other times, to other places. So I've always loved novels, fiction, historical fiction. Now as an adult, I read nonfiction, but if you ask me about books, the first thing that comes to my mind is fiction and being transported someplace else. I have been fortunate enough to live in several different countries around the world, and I think some of my sense of adventure came from reading books. So I could imagine myself in another place, in another time, which perhaps made traveling easier for me. I always wanted to learn more, and books answered questions, exposed me to things that I didn't know. I've always loved books, and people who are here at Trinity College know that when I give a speech, whether that's for commencement or convocation at the beginning of the year, I almost always focus my remarks on a book that I've read recently. And I share it with the audience and some of the lessons that I learned. And that's always a centerpiece and heart of any speech that I give. James Williams, that some people called Professor Jim, and Edward Jones, who was the first Black person to receive a degree in the 1820s. From Trinity College, he received an honorary master's, as far as we can tell, and that was the first person of African descent to have received a higher education degree in the state of Connecticut. And now you can find information on the internet. It's not quite the same and tangible as having a book in your hand, but there are all kinds of ways to find out wonderful stories. The library, as I was a teenager, was an important place to go to answer questions that I had, to find new books to read, to explore the world in a different way. Now, maybe it's not just me, but many teenagers go through what I might refer to as a melancholy stage. Things are hard and difficult, and you're struggling exactly because you're trying to figure out who you are and what you care about. And I remember going through, for example, my Tennessee Williams phase. And many of his plays are not happy plays, but they make you feel and struggle. And I remember after reading one, then I wanted to read another, and I really wanted to explore this genre. And I read most of Tennessee Williams' plays as written plays long before I either saw the play or saw the movie. So once again, books, especially I felt in my teenage years, were cathartic. Access is essential for a democracy. To be able to make a choice, to be able to vote your choice, you need access to information to be able to make a good choice. And I think a number of people feel as though our choices and access is being more limited. We know how problematic it is to have information and news provided and channeled to you without broad access. Someone sees that you click once on something that is about food, and then they just funnel all food news to you. Maybe it was just one time that you clicked on it, but similarly, how are we able to make good choices without full and broad access to information, to literature? I still cannot imagine or understand anyone that would want to limit access to books. If you want to discredit an idea, it should be with other better ideas, not by limiting the number of ideas that you hear about or read about. So the most stifling thing that you can do to a democracy is prevent access, to limit what people can read, when and how they can read it. I think information is what people need to make good choices. And a democracy is based on the ability to make good choices. And here in higher education, how could I ever promote limiting access to knowledge, even the things that I do not agree with and do not agree with very profoundly? During my college years, libraries also played an important role. I went to a liberal arts college. I went to Wellesley College in Massachusetts. I was a psychobiology major, so a science major. But what the liberal arts did was opened my mind to much more than science. I took philosophy, and I took French, and I took English, and I took art history, and I took economics and fields very, very broadly. I could not have learned without access to libraries and information. So I went to college really before the internet, which means if I wanted to understand some of the latest scientific discoveries, I would go to the library and look through the science magazines that came out weekly. For example, the magazine called Science. I couldn't wait till the end of the week when the new copy of Science magazine came out, and I could flip through and see what are the new interesting discoveries in science. So it was also a place not just to read books, but also to be introduced to very current literature and magazines sharing the most interesting and exciting scientific findings of the day. My passion for books, where did it come from? It feels as though it was something so ingrained in my upbringing. I don't specifically remember a time not being around books or literature. My parents thought it was important to read newspapers. They were both college educated. I was very fortunate to have parents that both had post-secondary degrees. My father had a law degree. My mother had a master's in sociology. And it felt like they were reading all of the time. I didn't grow up watching television or movies all of the time. A primary source of entertainment, of learning about the world for me, was through written literature. And some of that you can find in a library. Growing up in Los Angeles, what I have to remind people is not all of Los Angeles is Hollywood. Hollywood is only a segment. And I loved movies. Maybe that's something that does come from being in LA, but I guess I always wanted to be different, and to have been a bookworm at that age was different from many of my friends who were only seeing things in the movies. But my mother and I liked to sometimes sit in the same place and read. We were reading separate things. That would be an activity for us to read together. It does feel sometimes that reading is becoming a bit of a lost art, and especially being able to read something from start to finish as opposed to just little sound bites of information. It feels as though we're losing some of that ability to discover the arc of something, that it has a beginning, middle, and end. And when you get these snippets of information, you can't always see that full arc of a character, of a story, of a nonfiction book. You don't get to always see fully where the author is trying to take you from to when you only get a snippet or information that's fed to you based on what some algorithm thinks that you care about or want to hear or see. Why did I pursue a career in education? I will tell you that when I was in middle school and high school and even college, I thought I was going to be a scientist for as long as I could imagine and dream. I thought that I would be a scientist pretty much full time. I think it was well into graduate school when I recognized that helping and empowering others through education was as satisfying and perhaps more satisfying than sitting at a bench. I like to tell people this is my little analogy. Most people have heard you give someone a fish, you feed her for a day. You teach someone how to fish, they can feed their family, perhaps, for a lifetime. I say you give her an education, she can change the entire fishing industry. That's what education is to me. The power to go beyond a fish, to go beyond a fishing pole and helping your own family, and the impact being able to change an entire industry and the world. That, to me, is what education can do, and the empowerment that comes through education. And that probably leads to why I wanted to be a college president in an institution in a city with real neighborhoods to impact, with real people to be able to empower. When I arrived here in Hartford and tried to understand the socioeconomics of the city, someone shared with me that they thought Hartford in the 70s and 80s invested in poverty and poverty services. And they actually did not invest in education and empowerment services. If you look at the K through 12 system in Hartford versus many of the surrounding towns, many people refer to the Hartford education system as being weaker. And so what does that lead to? People moving from the city to the suburbs where their children can be educated. We have to figure out how to invest in education, because investing in education and knowledge is investing in empowerment. And that is a very long way of saying why I decided to move from the laboratory bench into education. I thought I had the possibility of having an even broader impact. And it certainly wasn't anything I imagined for myself when I was in college, graduate school, I would have never envisioned that I would be a college president someday. But I think there are a couple of key ingredients to being a college president, or maybe I should say to being a successful college president. You have to love learning. You have to have the patience in understanding that for people to grasp complex ideas and thoughts takes time. You can't shove information into a person in a week. You can't create a 4-year college education in 4 weeks. So you have to have patience. And if we bring it back to libraries, all those books, the knowledge, the learning takes time. So you need curiosity to learn. You need patience to be able to impart that to someone else. And you need optimism because there's a lot of pressure coming at higher education right now and a lot of negativity that I think is unfounded. What is wrong with trying to teach people how to think? Tell me, where is the crime, the shame, the problem with wanting a better educated society? The best piece of advice I received was from my mother, who told me, you can be anything you want to be. It stuck with me because she said it every morning when she woke me up. She woke me up with a kiss, not an alarm clock, and said, you can be anything you want to be. So it was hearing the message, but hearing it over and over and over again. It means even after she passed away, even when people were trying to flood me with negative advice and negative images, I could just play that loop in my head. You can be anything you want to be. And the power and simplicity of that message, but how often it was repeated in my ear by someone who was clearly sharing it out of love. Why wouldn't that be the best advice I ever got? But I think it also shows how impactful each and every one of us can be to somebody else. It's love, a consistent message, and I just keep using the word empowering, but also empowering people to learn both sides of an issue, to learn broadly, to read broadly, to be curious. All of those are traits that I think I've been able to embody throughout my career. The advice that I would give to a 10-year-old is read everything you can get your hands on and read broadly and deeply as you can, whatever that means for a 10-year-old. The other piece of advice that I would give, and I think this is based on an NPR story that I heard recently, which was talking about young adult literature right now and how often it describes dystopia of the future. And so many of our young people are growing up thinking that the future is going to be awful. So if I could give advice to a 10-year-old, read happy stuff. Read books or things that actually help you envision a future that you want, not accept a priori that the future is going to be completely polluted with awful people in dictatorships. That does not have to be the future. So I would say to my 10-year-old self, read and read happy books and read books about a future that you would like to see. There will be plenty of time to read sad books. Let books help you find your joy, and they shape how you perceive other people And some of those early stories that I shared with you about reading books about people from other places. And then you go meet people from other places, but your mind has been open enough to think that they have something to share with you. And I think when you're 10 years old, perceiving a happy world is a good thing. The role that respect plays in my work, I will admit that it is hard to have influence over people if they don't respect you to some degree. And in a funny way, you're asking a bit about what I want my legacy to be. So I've already announced I'm retiring from Trinity College at the end of June 2025. And a lot of people are asking about my legacy. And I would like part of my legacy to be how much I cared about education and how much I cared about the city of Hartford. And I think that I have gained some respect here at Trinity College and in the city of Hartford because of the care and time I showed to the people here. They knew that I respected them. I respected them enough to give them my time and my best energy. And I think it is hard to gain respect without giving respect. So it has to be mutually felt by both parties. And interestingly, I keep coming back to that 10-year-old self. Kids are exceedingly sensitive to respect. If you do not respect them, they feel it because they don't always understand every word coming out of people's mouths, but they know body language. They know what they are hearing versus what people are sometimes saying. And so it's a reminder that if we want to be respected, we probably have to give respect and recognize that people will often see that in your body language and by watching what you do, not just what you say. When people say they love libraries, I do think they are saying they love learning. Maybe it is through books, but what I've loved about the modern library is that it is more than books. It is a space to learn and to explore. Sometimes it's a space to do that quietly on your own, but sometimes libraries have become spaces where you can interact with other people, where you can access more than books. You can access videos. You can access other kinds of information. And so I think that when people say they love libraries, they're saying a number of things. I think they're saying they love learning. I think they are saying they love a communal space that is devoted to learning. It is different going to a library or reading with someone as opposed to reading on your own. The library symbolizes community, but it also often symbolizes a place where there's quiet in a very noisy world. That doesn't mean silence, but it's a place where quiet generally takes over. And the other thing that I want to share about libraries is how often the librarians are helpers and guides. How often it is that you can walk into a library and find someone who will help you find a book, help you with a project that you might have in school, help you find the pictures or how to do something. The librarian is a helper and a guide many times when children need it. when sometimes their parents aren't home. This is somebody who helps and guides, and most of the time in a non-judgmental fashion. Those are just some of the elements about why so many people love libraries, because libraries serve so many multiple functions for a community. Think about it. We've talked a lot about children and how important libraries are for children, but how many times have you heard stories about libraries being important for literacy for adults? For people who have never learned how to read for one reason or the other, and that can go to literacy programs in libraries as adults and learn how to read. So I think the reason that so many people love libraries is because of their multiple functions in our society, and I've just named a few. I would say happy birthday to Hartford Public Library. 250 years in America is a long time. That is definitely one of our older traditions. And when I think about 250 years of the library, it actually reminded me of the fact that this summer I was in a number of places in Greece on vacation. And in Ephesus, we were able to see a library from, it must have been 200 years BC. And the fact that they knew and understood that it was a library means that people have valued the gathering of knowledge, not just for 250 years here in the U.S., but for thousands of years in our society. People have recognized the importance of knowledge and a place where knowledge is held. And that is what a library is at its best, a holder of knowledge. And to think that for 250 years here in Hartford, libraries have been holding knowledge about an early fledgling colony. Now we understand that it needs to also include the indigenous people who were here before those Western-style libraries were put into place. I would like to remind people that when we renovated a branch of the Hartford Public Library here in the neighborhood, I wanted to make sure that Trinity College offered financial support so that there is an adult reading room in the library named for Trinity College. When I think about Trinity being in and of Hartford, it's things like that not just the people that walk onto Trinity's campus, but the people who walk into a branch library also see the name Trinity College and realize that we're supporting knowledge development on our campus and beyond in the city of Hartford. I'd love that to be my legacy.
Thank you for listening to 250 Stories, a production of HPL Studios at Hartford Public Library. This episode was written and produced by Christopher T. Brown, sound by Sam Sigmund, edited by Faith Lucas, and with photography and graphic design support from Hartford Public Library's communications team and the Hartford History Center. For more information on this project, visit www.hplstudios.hplct.org. New episodes release every Tuesday, so subscribe to stay tuned.